the Syrian regime today carrying out large-scale military exercises. It's on an apparent warning to other countries to stay out of the escalating violence between the government troops loyal to President Assad and the rebel forces. Meanwhile, Special United Nations envoy Kofi Annan is painting a very grim picture of what's going on inside Syria. Peter Ducey, live in Washington with the very latest on this continuing crisis. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Eric. It was 4 months ago that Kofi Annan, the joint special envoy for the United Nations and the League of Arab States, rolled out a 6-point plan for peace in Syria that would start off with a ceasefire. But that did not work. And now Kofi Annan just said that his plan for peace has failed so far, telling a French newspaper, quote, "Significant efforts have been made to try to resolve this situation peacefully. Obviously, we have not succeeded, and perhaps there's no guarantee that we will succeed." Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is taking Annan's admission very seriously, and she says that his words should serve as a wake-up call for everyone, and that the future should be abundantly clear to those who support the Assad regime.
The days are numbered, and the sooner there can be an end to the violence and a beginning of a political transition process, not only will fewer people die, but there's a chance to save the Syrian state from a catastrophic assault that would be very dangerous, not only to Syria, but to the region.
Yesterday, 50 people were killed in Syria. 800 have been killed there in the last week, and more than 14,000 have been killed there since trouble started in March of 2011. And as Secretary of State Hillary Clinton warns about the state collapsing, there's really no guarantee the death toll will stop rising anytime soon, because she said that the opposition in Syria is now getting more effective at defending themselves and at going on the offensive against the Syrian military. Eric?
All right, Peter. Thanks so much for the latest. And for more now on the growing crisis in Syria, we're joined by Fox News contributor and former United States ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, who joins us every Sunday at this time. Good morning, Ambassador.
Good morning, Eric. Glad to be with you.
Of course. Well, Kofi Annan admits it. Failure. How can they finally be able to stop the violence?
Well, this initiative was never going to succeed. The fact is that Russia and China, two permanent members of the Security Council, have very different interests than the U.S., Britain, and France. And I think the Kofi Annan mission also shows a very important point. Going on almost 6 months now, proves that failed negotiations are not cost-free. By diverting people's attention from the real strategic context, people have allowed the situation in Syria to get worse, and they've allowed the Assad regime time to dig itself in. So I think it was a mistake from the beginning to think that Kofi Annan, or anybody else for that matter, was going to bring Russia and China to the same view as the United States, Britain, and France. It wasn't going to happen then. It hasn't happened since then. It's not going to happen in the future.
Well, the future is even tomorrow, because Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General, who you know so very well, he's due back in Damascus in the morning. I mean, what possibly could that accomplish?
Well, I don't think it will accomplish anything. I think the Syrian regime, through those military exercises you mentioned at the outset, continues to show determination. Now, it has not been a good week for the Assad regime. They've had a high-level military defector. There are reports of other officers defecting. But nonetheless, nothing has changed the Russian or the Iranian strategic imperative here, which is to keep, if not Bashar al-Assad himself in power, to keep that regime in power.
You mentioned Iran. Kofi Annan says they need to be part of the solution. How can that be, Ambassador, when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, I see you laughing, Ahmadinejad is saying that the nation should stop the Syrian crackdown because they're protecting the, quote, occupying regime, meaning Israel. Explain, please.
Right. Here's how I'd involve Iran in the Syrian matter. I would favor regime change in Tehran as the most effective way to facilitate regime change in Syria. It is just ludicrous to think that you can bring people together with completely opposing interests and get them to agree on something that only one side agrees in. It's not going to happen. And as I say, this continuation of the negotiations allows Western decision makers to avoid some very hard choices. I think, if anything, the continued progress of the Annan mission is simply going to make matters worse inside Syria, raising the risks of more civilian casualties. Nothing's going to change here until we detach Russia, China, and Iran from support for Assad through one mechanism or another.
With all of Annan's experience, being the Secretary General, years at the United Nations, do you think he will achieve something, or is he just being naive?
I think he doesn't understand that we don't have here a failure of communication. I think the Syrian sides understand each other quite well. I think in many respects this is a proxy war now in Syria between Iran and its allies in the region and the Sunni Arabs, loosely led by the Saudis, on the other. I think Russia sees the Syrian regime and its continuation in power as critical to what remains of its position in the Middle East. And those factors are not going to change. If Russia could replace Bashar al-Assad tomorrow with Bashar al-Assad the clone, they would do it. It's not a matter of individuals. It's a question of the regime itself. And as long as the United States doesn't face up to that reality, you can have negotiation after negotiation and nothing will change.
So, Ambassador, finally, your prediction: a stalemate continues as is?
I think as far as the eye can see, the hostilities continue, the civilian deaths continue, the standoff continues.
Ambassador John Bolton, always terrific to have your insight every morning on Sundays. Thank you so much, as always.
Thank you, Eric.